The Eagle has landed. It's alive! It's one small step for man.
We have come again with some more experiments.
Scrutinized and studied.
Just take your seat. Just take your seat.
Science, science, science is golden. Science, science, science.
It is our look at science around the Hunter. Dr. Chloe Warren is on a mission to introduce us to the people working in science and technology around our region. Hello there.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. You're freshly back in the country and invigorated and ready to tell us about a wonderful researcher.
I'm a tad
Jet lagged.
but I am out of bed and I said I would be here. So here I am.
We've dragged you out of bed. It's like 3 a.m. in your brain, but here you are. Who are we hearing from today?
Today we are chatting to Emily Ford, and I might just throw to her because she does a pretty great introduction about her work and what she does.
My name is Emily Ford and I'm a PhD student in medical biochemistry. I study female fertility, but more specifically I'm looking at a condition that causes early menopause in women, but I'm also looking at how we can make women's fertility awareness more accessible.
What a great introduction, Emily Ford. She's based at the university?
Yeah, she's at the University of Newcastle. She's at the Callaghan campus. And there's kind of two parts of her research. She does a lot of molecular biology stuff, looking very closely at that issue of early menopause that she talked about. But she's also doing some more social science area research around fertility tracking apps, which I found really interesting because being a young woman myself, I use these apps and they've just become more and more popular, and I talk to my girlfriends a lot about them and we use them all the time, and she's researching how people use those apps and not just in tracking periods but also in tracking fertility, and what other benefits or disadvantages those apps might bring to young women.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
It's an area that I hadn't thought much about, to be honest, but everyone I know has got one on their phone. Every woman I know, I should say, has got one on the phone. That's really interesting. So what is it that she's doing?
So she's interviewed a stack of women who have come back and explained how they use those apps. So she chats a bit about that.
Apps are a free market. They're for consumers, and although some might have professional input, it's not necessarily a requirement. And a lot of them I would assume to have medical disclaimers, which would waive any responsibility the app makers may have. So that's something we will look into next.
It's a bit scary to think that there's these things out there that people are using to make very important decisions about their health, and those systems and those products might not actually have gone through and the jump through those safety hoops that we might have wished that they would.
Yeah, this is something I've thought a lot about. On the one hand, if you regulate all these apps, it becomes a medical market, and that might stifle some innovations from developers, from tech people. So there's definitely, there should be guidelines perhaps, maybe, but strict regulation would probably eliminate the wide range of options we have. And it's not all doom and gloom. In the survey, a lot of the answers I had were free text, so women could tell me things they wanted to tell me, what they liked, what they didn't like. And a lot of the time, just putting in your symptoms, being able to export a graph to give to your doctor is, although they're not relying on it to make medical decisions, it's supporting their medical care.
Wow, very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I wonder whether that type of work will have a flow onto the apps that we see or the way they
to
work.
think so. It would be kind of circular in that research would feed back into industry.
Yes.
It's often quite tricky to get that circle completed. But
Yes.
Yeah.
Does she take a look at what's going on with IVF at all?
Yeah, so that's another area of her research. Obviously, talking about fertility and the way women use these apps, IVF comes up a lot, and most fertility researchers have opinions about IVF, and a lot of them can be quite negative, and I had a chat with Emma about that as well.
I think a lot of the time reproductive scientists see a bit of doom and gloom in that, because in one way it's an industry that's getting money and it's helping people, and it really is. But if the distribution of funds was more equal, perhaps we could solve the problems that send people there in the first place. The success rates of IVF overall haven't increased in 10 years. For certain treatments and for certain age groups, success has improved, but overall it hasn't really improved in the last 10 years. And I think a lot of work needs to be done. As more women are becoming mothers, older, they're being driven to these technologies because of this decline in fertility. It's not always a sure thing. And on average, women go through at least 2 cycles before they either drop out or have a child. And this has really big stress financially, emotionally, physically. These processes can be painful, time-consuming, and I don't think a lot of people know that. And certainly from my survey, along with the other questions, around half of people underestimate that. Yeah.
Emily Ford there speaking to Chloe Warren, and Chloe's here in the studio telling us a bit more about what Emily does as we continue our work to meet people in the Hunter working in science and technology. So Chloe, she's touched on there fertility apps, IVF, things that I guess at least it feels to me we know more about them are becoming more commonly used, potentially because of what she mentioned there about women waiting longer to start their family.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. Women are waiting longer to start their family because there are a lot more women in the workplace than there used to be 50 years ago. So it's that's a pressure put on people around the decision when and if to have kids is that's a whole other factor.
Yes.
And yeah, it's something that's changed a lot, and
a whole range of things really. You've got university or higher education, the cost of buying your own home, the casualised nature of the workforce. So there's a lot going on there that's kind of feeding into this space.
Yeah, and Emma is super aware of the context of her research as far as that is concerned as well.
We know that women's fertile period is limited. So at the age of 30, fertility starts to decline. By 35, it sharply drops. And we have almost no control over this. We know biology limits our decisions. So what can we do about that? Well, we can put money into research, into solving the decline in fertility. But right now, what we can do is actually change elements of our society so that even though we have biological restrictions, we don't have all these other hurdles that force women to enter these risky periods of delayed birth and putting themselves through trauma of miscarriage, of stillbirth, and all these other challenges.
Wow. Emily Ford there speaking to Dr. Chloe Warren, who's here now. Chloe, it's an area that's full of emotion. I don't know whether it's full of emotion for the researchers, but for the women and the families who are at the end of this that might benefit from the work Emily's doing, it's really emotional stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I worked with Emily on an arts project. I paired her up with a poet, Kerry Shying, and together they put together a piece of performance poetry for something I did as part of Tina, and the whole room was kind of shaken by the content and the poetry, and there was some music in there as well. It's something that affects everyone. We're all babies once, and a lot of us are going to have babies, and for a lot of us, and more people than maybe might expect, that's going to be a challenge. And it's something that people don't really think about until they're kind of forced to think about it. And Emma chats about that as well.
You really can't do this research and stay in your own little box, can you? We're talking about aging populations, we're talking about extinctions of species, and we're also talking about, more generally health and well-being and happiness.
And I think part of people's misconceptions just comes down to fertility and reproduction are generally taboo subjects. We don't talk about it a lot. The reproductive system is just another body part. You think it's always going to work. And when it doesn't, where do you go from there? We don't really know a lot. We know about how to keep healthy hearts, how to keep healthy lungs, but it's not widespread how to keep a healthy reproductive system. And it affects so much more than we might think, which is part of why I try and shout it from the rooftops everywhere I go.
She's shouting it from the rooftops. Talk about your reproductive organs. Is that what she's shouting?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. She's very
Talk about it,
passionate
think about it,
Yeah.
because it's a real issue.
Yeah, it really is.
Wow.
Quite emotional.
Yeah, it is. And wonderful to hear, though, of somebody so engaged in that space, working locally and doing great stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
which is what we're discovering along our journey with you, Chloe.